ready for tonight? Yeah. We may have a couple of people coming in because I see there's a few seats and a few books still. So we'll do what we will here. Good evening and welcome to an evening with Jorma Kaukonen. I'm Linda Cass. I'm owner of Gramercy Books, and we're just thrilled that you're here and that we have the privilege of bringing tonight's program to the Columbus area. Tonight, you're one of just 65 devotees who get to learn more about the music and life of one of the most influential guitarists of all time. This event sold out shortly after we announced it. I believe that this is the only actual bookstore in the country on Jorma's book tour. I know he's going to be at the Beacon Theater and he's going to be at a lot of performance halls across the country, but I think we're the only bookstore. So at Gramercy Books, a large part of our mission, besides offering Central Ohioans a curated independent bookstore, is to be a place to discover and to come together through events like tonight. We host book talks, poetry readings, a songwriter series, a monthly book club, author festivals, and special programs that we present under a series called Gramercy Salon at 2424. On your seat is a flyer with just 2 remaining November events. If you're not on our mailing list, give us your email before you leave, and you'll get our newsletter and learn more about what we're doing. Tonight's event falls under our regular Songwriter Spotlight series, where we might feature songwriters writing books like tonight, or songwriters performing an evening of story and song. We have a dedicated music section at Gramercy Books because, as you all know, music has a huge impact on our cultural consciousness, and the greatest songwriters are storytellers and poets. Just like our guest this evening. Jorma Kaukonen is a profoundly influential guitarist and founding member of the rock bands Jefferson Airplane and still touring Hot Tuna. In his memoir, Been So Long, Jorma gives us a candid and emotional account of his life and work, a career that has already spanned half a century, and one that has earned him induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. The grandson of Finnish and Russian Jewish immigrants whose formative years were spent abroad with his American-born diplomat father, Jorma channeled his life experiences into his art in unique ways. And in his memoir, we read about his coming of age in Pakistan and the Philippines, his early gigs with Jack Cassidy in D.C., jam sessions in San Francisco with Jerry Garcia, Janis Joplin, and other contemporaries, and interspersed in the book are diary entries, personal correspondence, song lyrics. His memoir is as unforgettable and inspiring as Jorma's music itself. Tonight, Jorma will be interviewed by music aficionado and good friend Alec Wightman. Alec's Zeppelin Productions has promoted national act singer-songwriter concerts in Columbus since 1995. He's a board member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where he served as chair from 2013 to 2016. He's also a partner at the national law firm Baker Hostetler. I have Alec to thank for making my introduction to Jorma's wife, Vanessa. For the past 20 years, Jorma and Vanessa have operated Fur Peace Ranch, a concert center in southeastern Ohio, and a camp for studying guitar and other instruments. So after the program, Jorma will be signing your copies of Been So Long, and probably the best way to do that would be to walk through this aisle here and make a line, and he will be signing in that table that's in the other side of the store. So now let's give a warm welcome to one of the most highly respected interpreters of American roots music, blues, and Americana, Jorma Kaukonen, and to Alec Wightman.
That makes me feel pretty self-important.
Well, you know, you've got your wonderful creative artist, and you've got your obsessive-compulsive lawyer. And I spent hours and hours working on an outline and questions and sent them down to Vanessa and then refined them and sent them down a second time. And Jorma just told me that he never saw them. So, so let's wing it a little bit. And
but sure, why not?
You know, tell us about the book. Why did you write it? What caused it to happen?
So when I was a kid, my handwriting was always so terrible, and they'll find out when when the signing of the book comes, but it's terrible, but it's my signature anyway. So I learned to type at an early age, and I always enjoyed just writing stuff down, and I guess it would be called journaling, or we didn't know what a computer was back then, but just writing stuff down. So I always enjoyed doing that, and I always kind of did it all my life. And then as time went on, and we got sort of caught up in this computerized thing, I started doing some online stuff in the 90s before the word blog was known by everybody. I didn't know what it was either. And once again, I really liked it. And one thing led to another. And in the early 2000s, a guy came to me from a book publishing house, which will be nameless, and they wanted to do a project, but they wanted to do a co-writer. And I knew the co-writer, so we talked about the stuff, and I realized what they really wanted is for me to tell stories about people that are more famous than me, which wasn't really what I was interested in.
Yeah.
So I just passed on that. And anyway, so at some point, Vanessa hooked up with the folks at St. Martin's Press, and as she does, because she's my manager also, she got me a deal. And then we got an advance, and once we got the advance, I actually had to write the book.
And you had journaled much of your life. I mean, the journal entries that are in this book are wonderful.
And I never throw anything away either, so I had all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And no ghostwriter. I mean, obviously there's an editor in this process.
Editors are awesome. But there's no ghostwriter. Yeah.
Distinct from many of these, this is your
absolutely,
writing.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff in this book about your life, starting as a kid and right up until today. The common theme that runs through all of it is music.
Sure, and, absolutely, yeah.
You haven't, we did not dress rehearse this. I'm going to stick something under your nose.
Oh, no.
Because I'd just like you to read the paragraph. It kind of opens the book.
Sure.
And I just think that paragraph says a lot.
So. I'm really glad I brought my glasses in
me
from
too.
the car. Okay, this chapter is called Into the Light. What is it that makes us who and what we are? If I truly knew, I wouldn't have to write this book. I've got some suspicions, though. Our first moments of existence grow in the darkness of our mother's womb. At some point, the moment comes when we venture from darkness into the light of the world. It seems that we've been waiting for a long time. My first memories of light in the world seem to be about 2 or 3 years of age. And I remember this because that light came to me in the form of my mother's song. When Mom was at home doing whatever chores awaited her, she would always sing. And if she wasn't singing, the radio was on and song would fill the room. Music seemed to me to be the reward for being alive. To me, nothing has the power to evoke a place and time like music. It stirs memory in a singular way that is unmatched. Did I write that?
Hard to believe.
There's a few people in here who have heard me introduce singer-songwriters over the last 25 years, and a line I've used on occasion is, I really respect a great guitar player, I really respect a great singer, but for me, at the end of the day, it's all about the song.
Sure.
And you say that as well in this book.
Many of us say that, because that's really the deal, yeah.
And when you have folks come down to your and we'll talk about Fur Peace before we're done here, but a lot of folks come down there to learn from you about the guitar. But at the end of the day, it really is about the song.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you get a bunch of, I'm a guitar player, so I'm normally surrounded by people that play fretted instruments, but, we can geek out about stuff until the cows come home. But you guys don't care about that. You just want to hear the song. It's like, a classic example is, I'm always doing this and that. I figure something out, and I'll play it for my wife and my daughter, and Vanessa will go, I'll say, what, check this out. And she'll go, you've been playing the guitar for 60 years. You should know how to play it.
In the book, there's you quote a couple of guys that you know and knew pretty well. One of the great honors I had was bringing Guy Clark here to town years ago.
Sure, of course, yeah.
And Jim Lauderdale has played in town many times, although never a Zeppelin show. But you cite a little debate about, and you've written your share of songs at this point, about whether the song is, and I'm going to get this wrong, but maybe you can talk a little bit about it. Does a song succeed because it's personal to the writer, or does it succeed because it's universal to everybody, or are those not mutually exclusive?
I'm not sure they're mutually exclusive, but Jim Lauderdale, those that don't know him, he's a great performer and an artist in his own right, but he's a tunesmith. He writes songs for other people, so that means he's always looking to pitch songs and this and that. And because he's part of that Nashville gang, he's done a lot of songs for great artists like Patti Loveless and all sorts of people. And Guy Clark has done stuff also. But anyway, so I got involved in a writing project that went nowhere with Jim, except it was really a lot of fun. And he was talking about, he felt that to write a song that would be, and he's talking about hits because that's what he was looking for, is to write a song where your audience can relate to it without knowing who you are. And a lot of my songs, to me at least, are personal, and so I don't know if you need to know who I am or not. But anyhow, Guy Clark, I was talking to Verlin Thompson about this after Guy passed. Verlin was Guy's partner in crime for many years. And he said Guy discussed this also, and he believed that we all live one life, and if you can't relate to that one part, just haven't lived that life yet. And I kind of like that.
That's a great line.
That line, yeah.
That's a great line. Well, as I was thinking through what we were going to do here today and thinking about the songs, but it's also about the people, you've made me blink a little with your comment about that first publisher and what they wanted you to do. Yeah. But I can't resist those of us who, grew up in the 60s. Would love to hear a little bit more about some of the folks. But let's start with your influences. One of the...
Well, if I can just interrupt you just for a moment, so absolutely hold on to that thought. So one of the things, and I get that, from a publisher point of view, they want stories about this person and that person and such because they believe that will sell books, and I get that. But in the course of hearing yet one more time, don't you have any more stories about Jerry and Janis? What I said was, you've got to realize that I wasn't a fan of Jerry and Janis, which doesn't mean I didn't like them, but we were colleagues. Yeah. And that was the deal, and so our interactions happened really before all of us had careers and stuff like that, and after that we were too busy with our own lives to really interact in that way anymore. Yeah. And so the answer was, you got the best I can give you.
Yeah, well, let's talk about a couple of those folks, and then we'll come back to my influence question that I was going to ask, because I don't want to know dirt, and maybe not even a lot about the music so much, but you did know these folks as people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What was Janis Joplin like? I mean, it's an intriguing individual.
She is a really intriguing individual, and I've gotten to know her sister Laura a little bit, and what Laura told me was that Janis was always reinventing herself. And so the Janis that I knew, 1962 to 64, before the rock and roll thing happened, was the Bessie Smith, folky, bluesy Janis. And she wasn't always that Janis. She was other people, too. And when they did that Little Girl Blue thing for the PBS special a couple years ago, which did not have it. My book has a happy ending. That doesn't have a happy ending. But anyway, so they interviewed me for almost an hour for that, and I'm not in it at all. And the reason is, and I get that too, is that we never had sex or did drugs together. It really, in that time, it was all about the music, Yeah. So that Janis that I knew, I didn't know anything about her history, about the Port Arthur, about her problem with substance abuse and stuff like that. We just got together because we liked to play music together. Yeah. And that was the Janis that I knew. Now, Jerry, when I first met him, this was sort of a funny thing, I'm from the East Coast originally, and I wound up in California by a series of interesting mishaps. The main one was I really wanted to stay in college because my dad kept paying the bills if I did that, and I didn't have to go in the Army, but it's in the book.
And you weren't far away from here.
No, that's true. But anyway, so when I first moved out there to California, I'd just been living in New York, and I had this sort of like northeastern elitist attitude about stuff. I mean, how can anybody else, if you're not from the Appalachian foothills or New York City, how can you know anything about music? And of course, when I got to California, I found out that was far from the truth. And one of the first people that I met, not that first night, I met Janis the first night I was there, but was Jerry and his pals. And of course, Jerry knew a lot about music and was a really good guy and was really very open and friendly and shared a lot of good stuff with me.
We've got a guitar player or two here in the audience, and one of the first times you and I met, and I guess one of the things you learn is these are just people, and you don't always need to talk music, but I sneak a little music in.
No, music is good.
I asked you about Mike Bloomfield.
Sure.
I'm not a guitar player at all, but to the untrained ear, that was as fine of a guitar player as we ever had. You and Bloomfield became friends. What was he like?
We did. Well, again, it was one of these odd things. I wasn't really familiar with what was current at the time, Chicago blues, and of course Elvin and Michael and Butter and all those guys were the big dogs back then. He came to San Francisco in '65. I had this 2-room, 3rd floor walk up, and he stayed with us for a while. I don't even know how he got there. Bill Graham, I think, had something to do with it. And for whatever reason, because I had just started to play with the Jefferson Airplane, and whatever reason, he undertook to show me the difference between what I consider an amplified guitar and an electric guitar. This is an amplified guitar. Electric guitar, we get to make sounds and make faces and all that kind of stuff. And he started to show me how to do some of that stuff, and how to bend notes, and he took me under his wing for a very short period of time. Now, the Airplane did a bunch of shows with Butter and the guys, and so I got a chance to watch him close up. I don't play anything like him, but I learned a lot about the electric guitar from him. And just as a sidebar, Bob Sarles is a California filmmaker that does documentaries. He's just done a thing called Chicago Blues that's got footage. I've seen a lot of that stuff that I've never seen before of early Mike Bloomfield and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great. Parker and a couple of the others here in the place will kill me if I don't ask about Grace Slick. What was, this was a...
No verbal boundaries whatsoever.
And as I recall, this was a kid who had come out of a finishing school in New York.
Yeah.
Wasn't she like Tricia Nixon's classmate or something?
I mean, all that being said, well, and this really sums it up. When we got the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, they give you like 55 seconds for your acceptance speech, and it's supposed to be a family event because it was on the History Channel or something like that. I don't know. And so you weren't supposed to like swear and stuff like that. I mean, I'm listening to this and I'm going, she just never lets us down. I'm just wondering, how are they going to edit this? But they did it artfully, and she actually sounded genteel in a way. I mean, Grace, we've been talking. I talk to Grace a lot more these days than the last couple of years, and she just, I don't know what to say. I mean, I can't imagine even in finishing school that she wasn't abrasive.
Yeah.
In a loving, I mean that as a compliment. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of one last one, and then I'm going to spin back to the influence question.
Yeah.
How long have you known Jack?
Jack, I actually met Jack in '56. We started playing together in '58.
And you'll be playing with him in Marietta in a couple of weeks, I think.
And as I told
hot
you,
Tuna in Marietta.
I can't believe we got a real job from somebody other than the Fur Peach Ranch in Ohio. And you, of course.
Hey.
Why, you've never had hot tuna?
No, I haven't. We'll work on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So what about Jack? Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, I had an opportunity to do some sort of a serious radio thing with both of us and the interviewer. And my thing was, this will be the easiest interview that I've ever done because I won't get a chance to say anything. Yeah. People are always going, say something, Jack, you never talk. You can't shut this guy up, And, I mean, he's unbelievable. And he just goes on and on and on. He's my oldest friend. We're really different guys. If he was here, we'd be having some good laughs about all this. We've always respected each other as artists and men, and so we cut each other a lot of slack. As I say, we're really different. He's obsessive and anal or understating. I mean, we have this little house in Athens because my daughter goes to Athens Middle School, and we lent it to him while we're here. Now he's on the road. Every bit of shelf space in this little house is covered with an eye drop or a little hand grinder for a coffee machine or a little thing that winds his watch. It's just, it's like, what, you bring everything you own with you? It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Buddy Holly. Did you ever meet Buddy Holly?
I never did.
But a big influence on you early?
Oh, sure. On all of us. It's funny when you look back at that stuff today. I listen to, I'm not tuned into pop music today because the words don't mean much to me for the most part. But you hear all these really great singers and great players and all this kind of stuff. But back in my time, you heard people with what we consider to be trick voices. Chuck Berry had, Little Howlin' Wolf, all these people, there's just something special about their voice.
Yeah.
And Buddy Holly was one of those guys, too, not to mention the songs, of course. it was just really cool stuff. And the other thing is that it was accessible to us as extremely elemental musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I realize today, looking back at it, there's a lot more multidimensionality to what Buddy Holly and the Crickets did, but it was over our heads. But we could still strum and play the songs.
Yeah. Well, one that jumped out at me in the book, and you know, we all see these things through our own eyes, and it's my personal taste, but I was impacted to read you say how much Rick Nelson influenced you.
Oh.
And for me, I mean, and I saw Rick late in his career right here in Columbus, not long before he died.
Yeah.
He was a fabulous artist, I
Right.
thought.
Well, we never missed, the Ozzie and Harriet show. I mean, you have to remember, I was born in 1940, so when in the early to mid 50s when that show was big, and we were all kind of growing up with the Nelson kids, when the older brother, whatever, is David. When he got a motorcycle, holy shit, he's got a motorcycle, it's unbelievable. Rick, he's playing the guitar. I mean, we didn't know who Jim Burton was, but we knew who Rick Nelson was.
Yeah. Later, you figured out who James Burton was.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a song in the book, and I asked you earlier if you might play it. I'd like to know, first of all, when was the last time you played this song? And you're going to make my wife happy by doing it. When's the last time you played this song?
Somebody's senior prom. Used to run around with hearts, hastening my car. When I met that little girl, I knew that I would fall. Poor little fool. Oh yeah, I was a fool.
That's fabulous. That's a good one.
I'm not sure it's fabulous, but
Oh, it is.
should have been done with a flat pick. I know that, but
So I've asked you about some famous people that we all know. There's somebody in this book who I'm sure none of us here ever heard of before. I certainly hadn't. Ian Buchanan.
Oh yeah, Ian Buchanan.
And just reading you write about him was touching. Tell us about Ian Buchanan and what he meant to you.
He was a really interesting guy, and I met him, I guess it was in probably right after New Year's in 1960. And I'd been playing the guitar for 4 or 5 years at the time, but I'd always listened to all this fingerstyle stuff that I've come to spend the rest of my life doing, but I never knew how to do it. And Ian his mother was the editor of Parents Magazine. I guess today we'd call him a trust fund kid. He didn't have to worry about money, but all he cared about was playing the guitar. And he was really, really good. And he was one of these guys where if he went to a gig and the audience didn't listen, he'd just get up and walk away, and he wouldn't come back, and that would be it, because he really, honestly didn't care about this stuff. But for some reason, at that, I'm trying to think of the name of the house that we shared an off-campus house at Antioch. I think it was Morgan. It's a bed and breakfast now. Anyway, for some reason, he took it upon himself to teach me how to fingerpick, and so I really owe him. We're having this conversation in a lot of ways because of Ian Buchanan. Mm-hmm. Now, Ian's muse was Lonnie Johnson, who was much more of a jazz musician, and so that was completely over my head. And Ian didn't study with Reverend Gary Davis like David Bromberg and Stephen Grossman, a lot of the Woody Man, a lot of those other guys did. They were buddies, but he knew how to play all that stuff. And so he started to teach me the stuff that I wouldn't teach today as beginning songs. But anyway, and in those days, I've come to the point where I actually know what I'm doing when I'm teaching, and I can explain this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's really necessary, because when I came up with Ian and the guys, we didn't count, they didn't talk about downbeats, they didn't talk about keys. They just said, this is how it goes, and we scurry off into a corner and come back and, how's that? And they go, you suck, I told you. And that's how it was, and that's how we learned. In any case, he had a lot of patience with me, and within 3 months, when I was in that Antioch co-op job at the spinal cord damage hospital in New York City, mm-hmm. I was already starting to play out.
This is undress rehearsed. I haven't run any of this by you, but I'm throwing some things at you that impacted me. You wanna read this? It's a journal entry about Ian. Yeah, you need those glasses.
Oh, they're my head, right? Okay, good, nice.
But just in goes on to the next page.
Yes, I'd be happy to read this, but I got to tell you right now, one of my buddies I ride motorcycle with, I gave him a copy of the book. He thanked me for it, And I give him a day to start, and he starts reading. He calls me up and he says, he was really upset that that I do stuff that's not chronological. I mean, like this is 2003 from Keene, New Hampshire, but there's other stuff from other times. That was upsetting to him. And I realized, and I told him, that's because you read shop manuals for entertainment. Really? Yeah. Okay, Saturday, December 6th, 2003, Keene, New Hampshire. Life went on, as life does, and at the Fur Peach Ranch I met this guy, Rich, who knew Marty Brennan, Ian's friend. We started to talk, and he talked about his buddy, Marty Brennan, back in New York. The next time Rich came to the ranch, I went down to my studio and grabbed the Dobro I'd bought 8 or 9 years ago. I gave it to Rich and told him to give it to Marty. There's repayment of a long-owed debt. He did so, and a torn thread in my past began to be mended. Last night at the Colonial Theater in Keene, New Hampshire, Rich and Marty came to the show. It had been over 35 years since I saw the man, but I would have recognized him anywhere. It was such a great pleasure to reconnect. There was more, though. He brought an old J200, not just any old J200, but the big Gibson that Ian had left with him when he died, the one I first heard him play. I picked it up and started to pick. I remembered that sound as if it were yesterday. In the case was an old kerchief Ian used to wear to cover his mouth when he rode his motorcycle on cold days so long ago. Brennan entrusted the guitar to me for safekeeping for a while. It sits next to me in my hotel room right now. Time folds in upon itself. I think of those days 4 decades ago. Ian is alive. We are all young and strong and full of hope. Linda is beautiful as she sings a Roy Acuff song. The son she was pregnant with would be in his mid-40s by now. The music is everywhere. It was all we lived for at the time. New York, San Francisco, the transcendental yo-yo was everywhere. We were young. What more can you say? I pull myself back from the well of memory. It has snowed since I went to bed last night, about 6 inches. It is cold up here in New England, but my heart is warm with friendship. Thank God for friends, new and old. Thank God for the chance to plunge into this pool of memory and emerge into the crisp present air dripping with places and people and things long gone. I am blessed. I think I shall speak to Ian through his guitar. I hope he's resting well, and for us here, it is another great day. At a speaker meeting I was at tonight, I heard this: you can count the seeds in an apple, but not the apples in the seeds. So it is with us as sons and daughters. I think if my mom and dad were alive today, they would not be unpleased with the way my brother and I have grown. That's a good thought. Another thing I heard I like was this: had God has given us justice instead of mercy, none of us would have been here today.
It's a good one. You went from Ian Buchanan and Antioch College to San Francisco and Surrealistic Pillow.
Yeah, well, I actually did that via the Philippines because I wound up going to a Jesuit school.
That's all in the other outline there.
Yeah, it's in the book. It's in the book. But that's important because I picked up all these. It's sort of a funny thing for a Jewish kid to go to all these Catholic schools, but that's how it worked out for me. They cut me a break on the religion. I didn't have to go to Mass or anything like that, but that's another story. Anyway, so I picked up all these credits in like Aristotelian logic. You know, I learned to say things like "if so, then; if not, not." You know, stuff like that. And nobody but another Jesuit school would take these things. And I wanted to go to USF because that was beatniks were in San Francisco, but my grades weren't good enough, so I went to Santa Clara, where it now costs $70,000 a year to go. Wow. My dad complained about $1,500.
And it's all in the book, so I can't ask you too many questions.
You
but
could.
Tell us about the recording of Surrealistic Pillow. What was the experience like? You cut this in a couple of weeks? Is that?
I think we did it. Yeah, we did it in less than 2 weeks. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One thing, we were pretty well rehearsed for that session. And the other thing also is that we didn't really have a budget for stuff. We hadn't really started to make any money for RCA. They foolishly extended budgets. That's another story later on. And we had great guys that we were working with, and Jerry Garcia worked with us on that also, which was very helpful because Jerry had been playing in bands for years, jug bands, bluegrass bands, and most of us, with the exception of Jack and Spencer, had never really played in a real band. So the concept of arrangements, and all, I mean, we just didn't know how to do that stuff. In any case, working with great guys, I don't think we even felt I look back at it now and I realize there probably had to be a lot of pressure on us, but I think we were too stupid to realize it. And the other thing was also in that era, that was before noise reduction, so you couldn't do more than one overdub before you degraded the tape and had to cut everything over again. So as a result, for the guitar geeks out there, and I know there's one or two of you somewhere, I know that the ending note of the out vamp for Somebody to Love is a little flat. It's become an it's become an archetype, you know. But having done that, it could. Now today we'd fix it. You go to Pro Tools and you fix it, and that'd be that. But it's part of the song now.
Have your fingers warmed up enough to do a
do
cut off of that
something?
song? There's one on there that people here probably would like to hear.
Well, let's see. If they're not warm, you'll cut me a break, right?
Well,
You know, one of the things that we talk about when I'm teaching is when guys like me make a mistake, nobody dies. It's perfect.
there are a couple of doctors in here, so that's...
Really? Well, listen, I have this pain.
When I'm just thinking about when they make mistakes. It's a different result.
We didn't have these things back then either. So I was talking to a songwriter friend of mine, Chris Smither, at a gig while I was tuning up using my tuner. And I said, what did we do before we had these things? And he said, we played out a tune. I have a son that plays guitar also, and I was asking him if he wanted to learn how to tune the old way. And he said, why? I've got a tuner. I said, what if the battery goes dead? And he said, you'll tune it for me. Is this the song you're talking?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Well, did you ever think you'd hear that in a bookstore in Bexley, Ohio? Pretty cool. You mentioned earlier about being at a speaker meeting. You're not the only person in the room tonight for whom substance issues has touched your life. I'm not even
We're
sure
everywhere.
I'm not sure what question I even have for you there. But
we're like germs with penicillin.
It was an important part of your life.
Absolutely.
And,
That's probably why we're having this conversation.
And a miracle that
Totally.
you came out the other side.
It is. And, I was thinking about some stuff because, I really avoided, getting into drunk logs or drug logs or stuff like that, because there's nothing.
You
really
did avoid it.
Yeah, well, there's nothing really new under the sun. But it occurred to me, I have a friend that I was at a speaker meeting in Akron at Founders Day this past year, and he was in the service, and he talked about, he said, I've been places you don't want to go and seen things you don't want to see and done things you don't want to do. But that's not why I'm a drunk. But and I got to thinking about that. I'm not a vet. I'm just a silly guitar player. But we've all done that stuff too, and it's nice not to have to do it anymore. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. And what you do now is spend a lot of time at Fur Peace Ranch.
I do.
Why don't you just tell us how that happened? How'd you end up in Meigs County, Ohio?
Well, you talk about God shots or whatever, however you want to phrase this sort of thing. 1989, I'm up in Woodstock. The phone rings. It's really funny that we all take our cell phones for granted. But in 1989 in Woodstock, I still had a phone on the wall in the kitchen. That was the only phone in the house. Of course, I hadn't paid my phone bill for a long time, so that might have had something to do with it too. But in any case, and this buddy of mine calls me up, who lives on where the Fur Peace Ranch is today, and he said, I've got 126 acres of really pretty property in Southeast Ohio, and you can have it for $32,000. And I thought, I'm going to go down and have a look at that. So I did. Oh, and Vanessa's going, hang up the phone. So I drove up to Albany, and I got in a plane. I flew to Columbus, and my buddy John Hurlbut, who's our ranch manager, and I drove down. Now, I know this is going to come as a big surprise to you, but they've grown a lot of pot in Meigs County over the years. And my friend was in the agricultural business, and he was in the process of retiring, or whatever these guys do when they no longer do that. And so I looked at this piece of property. It was kind of a cruddy winter, not like the winter of '93, but it was a sort of a wintry mix. We live in Ohio. We all know what that deal is. In any case, and I said, I just have a good feeling about this. So I bought it. And then I came back, and of course, Vanessa, I can't believe you bought it. And then we went down and looked at it. And when we first started to move our stuff down there in '91, we cleaned up camouflage netting, start boxes, irrigation stuff, just like in the movies. Every now and then a start box pops up out of the bottomland or something, and that's how I wound her there. That my friend's name was John Clark. He's passed away a number of years ago, and if it weren't for this guy who was John was a no bullshit outlaw. I think the only time he went to prison, he went to England for income tax evasion. But other than that, he didn't have a driver's license. He didn't have a passport. I mean, he absolutely had none of the stuff. I've got more ID in my pocket right now than he ever had in his whole life. In any case, if it hadn't been for him, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So thanks, John. I appreciate that.
That's great. That's great. You heard it. Well, you know my background a little bit. So I couldn't get away without asking the question, what did the induction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame mean to you? And you won that, Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yeah.
The band got that. What do those kinds of things mean to you?
And I got a Grammy nomination in 2003 for Bloomfield, Ohio.
Yeah, absolutely. Which probably meant more to you than the other two
first
things.
of all, after all this said and done, it means a lot because it's nice to be recognized by your peers. But a classic thing is, like, some years ago we were doing an interview, Jack and I were doing an interview, and of that question, and Jack goes, when we were kids, we always wanted to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm going, hey, Jack, when we were kids, they didn't have a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But I knew exactly what he meant. So it's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I know it's highly politicized. I know lots of stuff goes on, and if our ex-manager wasn't friends with Jan Wanner, we probably, but who knows? But that's okay. It doesn't matter because we did. And I got the little statue and all that stuff. What's not to like?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there another song you'd like to play for us tonight? Is there something that, and then I can ask you another question or two, and we'll open it to the audience.
Let's see.
What?
Another song. I don't normally play on a stool. I get dizzy up here. No, I just don't. But so I'm apologizing in advance in case I screw the song up. So that's okay.
It's a pretty safe audience tonight.
No. Blue skies in the morning, stars they fill the night. Fall wind rustling through the trees sings a song of great delight. On such a day, you think you'd say exactly what you mean, but in God's perfection, things ain't always just the way they seem. When the best you have to offer falls short of the mark, self-inflicted holes are piercing deep within your heart. Blue skies in the afternoon, breeze it starts to still. Two dogs sleeping in the sun, they lie upon that grassy hill. At such a time, you think you'd find a way to show your heart, and though you're reaching for her hand, still you walk apart. When the best you have to offer falls short of the mark, self-inflicted holes are piercing deep within your heart. Sun upon that old barn roof celebrates the day. I hold this moment in my hand, follow it along my way. The future flows, this feeling grows outside my windowsill. By letting go, I might escape prison of my will. When the best you have to offer falls short of the mark, self-inflicted holes are piercing deep within your heart. When the best you have to offer is all you have to give, enjoy the moment God has granted. One more day to live. Blue skies out my window said goodbye to early morning day.
Wow. That's fabulous. Thank you.
By the way, I saw you look at your watch. Am I playing the song too long, or?
No. I do want to make sure we leave time for questions, but I'm going to put you to work one more time.
Sure.
This book does have a happy ending.
It does.
Do me a favor. Read the last.
Last 20 pages.
Last 20 pages. Read that last section, and then we're going to let people ask you questions.
Boy, did I write all this stuff?
Yeah,
I did the audio book for it also.
Did you really?
And it took 30 hours to read it. And I got to say, I've been working in studios and stuff most of my life. This is a whole different ball game. It really is. I mean, you can't talk too fast. You got to read slow and all that kind of stuff. And Maddie Geropoulos, the gal that was our producer, I mean, they do this all the time. It's just another book. But I mean, the way they actually direct your reading and stuff, it was awesome. And there were all kinds of like big stars. They were doing this books, and we bonded because there's nothing but book readings. We bonded over how difficult it really was compared to what we usually did.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that I met, I mean, meet these interesting people in this line of work. He's a guy that's a reader. All he does is read stuff. That's his day job. And his night job is in Hamilton. If you live in New York, you got to have at least 2 jobs.
I guess.
Okay. In a normal world at my age, I would probably be a great-grandfather, at the very least. Now I tend to spend time with people that are considerably younger than I am. It wasn't planned that way. At the time of this writing, Vanessa and I will have been married for 30 years. I have a young daughter who's a pistol and a son who's a fine young man. I'm so proud of both of them. Who can script a life and who would want to? When someone asks me if I ever think about retiring, I say, why? So I can spend more time playing the guitar? Both my kids play music. Both my kids will occasionally go to the range with Dad and go shooting. They both like to ride motorcycles with me, but I see both their lives evolving without being submerged by who and what their parents are and do. My dad used to say that getting older was a series of successful adaptations. I'll try to keep that in mind. As for me, I'm so fortunate that I get to look forward as well as back. I will never forget one of those last conversations I had with my mother when she looked wistfully at me and said, I wish I could believe. At the risk of putting words into the mouth of someone who could no longer dispute them, I sensed a lack of fulfillment. I'd like to think that I'm still seeking and finding fulfillment. I keep finding a large measure of this fulfillment in the Fur Peace Ranch. We started thinking about the ranch in the early 90s, when we started building in 1997. We had the most distant of visions. It was almost as if we could see a hidden world through a fog, but not quite. There was surely some unseen guidance here. I doubt we could have conceived of it this way at the time, but we created a haven for like-minded spirits. We find ourselves surrounded with the joy of spirit that only music can provide, and to be a part of this is indeed transcendental. As for the road, does it go on forever? We'll just have to wait and see how long forever is.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yikes. I have to say also, that the whole writing thing, like I said, I've sort of been journaling and writing stuff like that all my life, but to actually see it like this, and I'm reading this stuff, and I actually think, did I actually write this stuff? It's unbelievable. It really is.
That's cool. Can you take some questions from the crowd?
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
You pick them.
Well, we'll start with
Sure.
Parker right here.
And I had this question 5 minutes ago, but
Uh-oh.
it's a perfect segue to what you just said. I want to know where you were when you first heard your music on the radio.
Ooh, that's a really good question.
And how you felt. How did you feel?
Real, authentic.
Yeah.
No, it was in San Francisco, probably when the first record came out. Yeah, because we weren't traveling that much back then. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Are you kidding? I mean, because of course, now, who cares if you're on the radio? Now you just go to YouTube or something like that. But, yeah, it was a big deal back then. Oh, yeah.
What was that tune?
It was probably, because we had a short-lived single called Running Around This World. There's a funny backstory on that too, because there's a lyric in there where it said, "Nights that I have spent with you have been fantastic trips," and of course the record company felt the trips that they alluded to both sex and drugs, and so it's kind of funny considering what we listen to today. But so they made us go back in and re-record a cut, and in the place of the word trips, Cantor just blew an incredible raspberry. So there's a couple of collectible 45s with that on it. I've got one of them.
That's good. Other questions? Yes, Joy.
How much influence would you say Bill Graham had on the music scene in San Francisco?
Oh, I think it was huge, and I think the interaction between him and Chet Helms is also important too, because they're very different guys, but they were kind of doing the same thing. But Bill was just one of these guys that took it upon himself to get things done, not always in the nicest possible way. And because he managed us briefly, one of the reasons that we parted ways is because he wanted us to wear suits or band uniforms or something, which being the 60s wasn't really what we did. But I had a huge, his ability to organize things, to make things happy, and like to do things that required getting the approval of political figures in San Francisco at the time, stuff like that. Interesting stuff.
Yes, sir.
In light of your journaling, did you ever talk to Ken Kesey about writing?
To
Ken Kesey?
I never did. And sad to say, I probably am not going to get a chance to for a while. I'm not going to rush that one. But the last time I saw Kesey was in 1995 on that first Further Festival thing, and he showed up dressed in an American flag. I don't think we ever really talked about anything except what was going on at the moment. Too bad. Oh, well.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a preference between the Jefferson Airplanes version of Somebody to Love or the original version, The Great Society, I think it was?
I think it's really, in a way, it's really apples and oranges because the tunes are really different. The Airplane version is a more traditional rock and roll song than what The Great Society did. And a lot of that arrangement, we can thank Jerry Garcia for that because he knew about making things into songs, which is funny considering the way the Grateful Dead went and their thing. But for all our stuff, he actually forged us into a band that did songs. So for me, it's almost a different song. That soprano sax solo, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Rocky?
There were 500,000 young men in Vietnam in '69 when volunteers came out.
Sure.
Did your band realize the impact that you were having?
The answer is I don't think so. I don't think that. I get a lot of questions. I'm really lucky because I get like college seniors that are writing a thesis on Woodstock or something like that now. Or did you realize what? And the answer is of course not. In a way we just kind of took our world for granted. I don't think that we really realize how much of a soundtrack of many people's life our music would become.
You played Monterey.
I did.
You played Woodstock.
Correct.
You played Altamont.
Yes, we did.
Wow. I'm not even sure there's a question there, but wow.
What was Woodstock like?
What a mess. I mean, but again, that's a good. I get this question all the time. But see, we were only there for this. I didn't hang at Woodstock.
Yeah.
I will say there was a shortage of porta potties. I can swear. I can attest to that. But
Were you flown in?
no. Listen.
Yeah.
Just welcome to my world. No. Actually, there's another story with that too. No, we drove in those days. People go, boy, it must have been great traveling around those tour buses. They didn't. Country stars had tour buses. We drove in Ford LTD wagons, and our equipment truck was a Metro bread delivery truck. It's like a UPS truck with the sliding doors, only it's all aluminum. It said Grumman on the side of it. So we drove in the evening, a little bit before we were supposed to play, and of course we went on 18 hours later. When we drove in, we went on back roads. We had no idea what was going to happen. By the time we got there, we realized this is something very different indeed. And another part of my story that I talk about all the time is we drove in on these back roads. It was easy. Leaving, because we had to go to do that TV show in Manhattan, the amount of road left wasn't quite as wide as the car. And so for anybody that lost hubcaps or trim that day, I'm really sorry.
You did.
That's all I can say.
Couple more. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
One of the sheer pleasures I have at Fur Peace Ranch is the intimacy and the absolute silence that people give the performers. But when you and Jack are playing together, which I've been lucky enough to see 2, 3, 4 times, your friendship and your rapport and your symbiotic relationship that you describe in the book is so palpable that it just enhances things so much. So I don't think I have a question there other than I'm on the wait list for Saturday night. Is there any way to do that?
You got to talk to my wife about that. But one of the things Jack and I joke about, like I said, we've been friends forever, but we're also from Washington D.C. in the early '50s. And there's an inherent obnoxiousness to our personalities. We're the only people that will really tolerate each other for any great length of time.
Yes, sir.
What kind of things are still left on your bucket list?
Oh gosh, lots. I need to ride a train across the country. I need another long motorcycle trip. I'm going to Italy again next summer, so I don't need to worry about that. I mean, stuff is always coming up, you know, and I'm really fortunate because I've been because I've been reasonably healthy and I'm still able to do a lot of the stuff that I like to do, which is not always the case. But you know, like I said, I've got a 12-year-old daughter in 8th grade, and even though she's at an age now where she could really care less about anything I want to do, she's spending next summer with me, and that's how it's going to be.
All right, one last question, and then we'll let him sign some books.
Who do you consider today's great guitar players?
Oh man, there are so many of them today. We've got a local guy. I'm not sure if he lives in Columbus. A young guy named Micah. They say I heard an oh yeah. Yes, exactly. I mean, he's a local guy. He's unbelievable.
Mitch, the sound man.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I'm really horrible with names, but I get around a lot. I hear that, you know, the bar has been raised to a point that we couldn't have conceived of when I was their age, and that's good. That's the way it ought to be. Okay. The future's safe. It's going to be okay.
Linda, you told me 7:30. We're going to stick to that and let him. Do you want to do another song, or have you?
Question, song.
What do you want to do? Let's do another song. Do one more song, and then we'll let you.
All right, hang on a second.
It is all about the music, after all.
Yeah, right. Thanks. It is all about the music.
It is all about the music.
I mean, I'm a gabby guy. I like to talk also, but it is all about the music. So let's see. Well, maybe a trad blues. What do you think?
Yeah.
Now, you know, as far as these darn things, you know, as you can see, I've got a pocket full of them because when they break or you lose them, I can't play without them. Yeah. If I had to do it over again, I'd learn to play without them, but late in the game for that. All right, well, let's see here. I thought this was going to be a tough crowd, but they're okay.
They're okay. A lot of friendly faces.
Baby, how long that evening train been gone since that blood red sun went down. You know I'm walking down the track, Mama, Lord, I said, feeling so sad, lost best woman man ever had. How long? Well, how long? Baby, how long? Well, how long, baby, how long? That evening train been gone. It's been gone since that blood red sun went down. You know, I thought I heard a whistle, Mommy, Lord, and I think I see a train. Deep in my heart there is an aching pain. How long? How long? Baby, how long? Well, how long, baby, how long? And even trailing, it's been gone since that blood red sun went down.
Oh my. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
That book will make a wonderful holiday present. Make sure you buy lots of copies of them.
And there's a little CD in the back of it too.
Now we're talking.
Thank you so much, both of you. It was just
Oh.
wonderful. We are just thrilled to have
Thank you very
here.
much.
And I guess there's going to be some more time.
Yep. Great. That was fun.